Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Glad you joined us today. As always, I'm Rob and here with my friend Kevin, and we're going to talk about stuff that matters. So, Kevin, to start off things that matter, cool sweatshirt.
Thanks. Likewise. Elephant in the room. We walked in this morning and we're both wearing different versions of the same sweatshirt that was swag from a youth conference this weekend called Encounter. So Rob did an amazing job speaking at it, and we paid him with a sweatshirt, and there was one
all I
left
wanted.
over, so I got one. First of all, good looking.
Yep.
Unbelievably comfortable. Am I right?
Very true.
Most comfortable sweatshirts I've ever owned.
It's a perfect spring sweatshirt too, because it's like light.
It is light.
You know, it's light, but still keeps you warm, but it's comfy.
It's so soft.
It's extremely soft.
I haven't washed mine yet. Have you washed yours?
No, because I don't want to lose this.
Right. Isn't that the most disappointing thing? You're like, yes, this is so amazing. Then you wash it and you're like, this.
Wah, wah,
yeah.
wah.
Bring it to Goodwill. So anyways, not that we would ever do that because we value these things. Can I also say that color, when we were looking at colors,
yeah,
the color that you're wearing, which I would refer to as burnt sienna,
okay,
is actually called terracotta.
Terracotta.
And
it's more fun to say.
I wasn't a big fan when I saw it on the screen. And but then when we saw him live in person, I've become a fan. And can I say, you pull it off. Really
I'm about it, man. I really like this color.
You look good.
Thank you. You look good too.
Thanks, man. Part of my deal is I everything I own is a variation of usually gray or black.
Exactly.
And so,
which is also why I went for this. I'm like, I need more color in my wardrobe. You go through it, it's like all black, some white sprinkled in, some sports jerseys, and then like
the occasional denim.
Oh, of course. Denim for sure. Denim. Denim. Where is this podcast going? I have not finished my coffee yet, which is part of the problem. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, that's good. So here we are.
Okay, so this past Sunday,
yeah,
we've continued our series, We Get Closer, which has been so good. Really enjoyed it. This kind of built off the first week. I don't know if you explicitly said that, but I definitely saw it that way, where it's very helpful to watch week one to understand the 5 different levels of communication and conversation.
Which we talked about in the last podcast as well.
Yes, which we mentioned with Andres Blessing-Engel III.
Absolutely.
And this past week was 4 hubs of community. Can you talk about those 4 hubs? Again, I think this was a really great message. Really what this is doing, this is going to help build community for anyone and everyone in a healthy way. And I've just been so impacted by this series already. I hope I don't mess it up this Sunday as I'm trying to continue it, because you've started off strong. But anyway.
Yeah, so first of all, give credit where credit's due. 5 levels of communication was an adaptation for something that we got from Gary Smalley. And the 4 hubs of community is another, Kevin adaptation of something that from a book called The Search to Belong by Joseph Meyer, which all of us have read stuff or heard messages that go, oh, that totally, it makes sense to what I've seen, or it gives language for what I know to be true, or it just helps me to get understanding for reality. I also think it's helpful because it gives us a common vernacular in our community for understanding both process and problems in developing close relationships. So this week we talked about the 4 hubs, what I call the 4 hubs of community. And this is basically that community is such this big word, relationships is this big word, but we have both needs and opportunities within our life. So the first circle, if you want to look at it that way, is the public circle. I call it sometimes the geographical circle. These are connections and friendships and relationships that we developed in a public arena. Often they're geographic because they're attached to a place.
Sure.
a public domain. So like, and it can be a whole lot of different things. So it can be like your school, whether it's high school or even college, huge public domain. There's thousands of people or hundreds of people in it. And you probably interact with between 50 to 100 people in that public or geographic domain. So that can include you go to Fitness Edge, gym.
The Edge Fitness.
The Edge Fitness.
Yeah.
Yes. Gym. Sorry if there was,
it's okay.
Trademark
Great
problems
people.
with that too. Okay. So you go to the gym, right?
Yes.
I used to be a Planet Fitness guy. As you can see, no longer really.
Not your planet.
Yeah. Not really partaking so much anymore. Anyways, but you're in public. You're in a shared space. So for other people, it's like work. They work in a pool of people that they have various levels of relationship in that public circle. Then there's the social circle. After you've developed some connections with some people that may go into the social arena. The social arena is outside of that public arena or that geographical place. So think about school. You go to school with a whole bunch of people, hundreds of people, but then you start making connections with some people in your dorm or people in your class, and then you're like, hey, do you want to go out for dinner? Do you want to grab a coffee? Now you've moved that relationship from merely that public domain now into a social setting.
Or maybe in a pre-COVID world, this was your workplace.
Yeah.
Where, you have coworkers, you're in the same space as them, public.
Right.
But then when you ask that coworker, hey, you want to sit and have lunch together?
Totally.
Or maybe our families can hang out one night.
Right.
Something like that. It moves to this next sphere, social.
And this is where you have more fun. And then I'll go to the other two, and then we'll break them down a little bit more. So then there's the deeper circle. Social circle can be between, roughly between 5 and 25 people in your life. Then there's the deeper circle. Deeper circle is a smaller group of people that you share life with beyond the social circle. You've done lots of social things before, or you're put in some kind of a small group with or a team with, and you do the social stuff, but now you're sharing more about yourself, about your life, about, and then we'll connect you to the 5 levels of communication in a second. Then there's the deeper, between like 5 and 15 people, depending on who you are.
Sure.
And your stage of life. And some of this is seasonal. Like when I was in college, I probably had 25 people in my deeper pool.
Right.
Now, that's a smaller number. And then there's the intimate, usually between 1 to 3 people in your life at any given moment. This is who intimate circle is like who you do life with and who you bare your soul to. These are the people that that you trust the most and you've entrusted with yourself the most. So the conversation, 5 levels of conversation, facts, pleasantries
and cliches.
Second one is facts, usually about yourself, about your life. Third one is opinions, perspectives, and beliefs with the wall of confrontation. The fourth level is feelings, personal feelings. And the 5th one is needs, like soul needs, relational needs, the deepest parts of who you are. So you can see where these things really work together. In the public domain, you usually have cliches and pleasantries. Hey, what's up? Even in the gym, you give the head nod to the guy that,
Right.
That's a form of what's up, like seen you before. I recognize you, know, in that way. In school, it's, hey man, how you doing? What's up? What's the weather? Things like that. In the social, you start sharing facts about yourself in a deeper way. You start talking, this is, you're sharing lunch with each other. You talk about, oh, where'd you grow up? And things like that. Or, have any siblings in your life? And you go, oh yeah, you share things that are facts. Then the 3rd level, you start sharing, probably sometimes in that social level, if you've done it enough, perspectives, opinions, beliefs. And then if you could go into the deeper level, the deeper pool, that's where you share feelings. Intimate, that's where you give your deepest needs. You've trusted people with your feelings. So that's it on a nutshell. But we talked within our sanctuary community and church community, how all 4 of those hubs of community are so important. And there's usually a process of connection and building heart connection with people, that we have this ultimate need for deeper and intimate relationships. But there's a process for it. And that gives problems. It also gives opportunities. So that, in a nutshell, if you want to listen to the message, go back and listen to it, or actually read Joseph Meyer's book, The Search to Belong. It dives into a whole lot of deepness. But we have a deep need for heart connection. if we don't understand both communication and if we don't understand the process of developing hubs of community in our life, then often we're left disappointed or disengaged because we're not experiencing our deepest need because we don't know how to get there. We want to get close. We don't know how to get closer. So that's it in a nutshell. We can break it down, dialogue.
Well, before we get into the practicality,
yeah,
here's something that what you just mentioned was great, super helpful, really practical. It was informational, which
totally
was necessary. The key passage you had for this past Sunday night was Acts 2:42 through 47, which I've heard honestly a bajillion times. Most people, including I used to say this in 2013, like, we need to get back to that type of church, you know? And again, there's like 26 chapters after Acts and the rest of the New Testament where it's like, the church was in the honeymoon phase at that point. Yeah. Like, they hadn't split out yet. Like, persecution hadn't really come. Like, anyway, but
hadn't embraced Gentiles with a whole bunch of
just Jewish at that point,
cultural and relational and religious baggage, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had never heard Acts 2:42 through 47 preached the way that you preached it this past Sunday night, which was amazing. And a FAQ that was constantly debated in School of Ministry for sure, but you still see happen in like really churchy circles now is like, what's better, big church or small church?
Yeah.
Which one, Kevin? What do you think?
That is a great question, and I've been part of that debate. It's myself.
A loaded question.
It is an absolutely loaded question. And the way I've often answered that, because you'll find people who, especially right now, probably in the last 15 years, I think there's been a backlash against what's often labeled the attractional model church, which has often been associated with larger churches or bigger churches. And so the backlash has been, well, yes, it may be bigger, but is it better because we're not actually getting deeper in that way? I have two things for that. The first thing is when people usually start talking about like their preference of or what they think or what they believe, and then they find verses to back it up, which none of us would ever be accused of. Actually, we all do it, right? You know, here's what I think. Here's some verses to back me up.
Right.
So it is this. I've said to people, what's better, a big family or a small family?
Oof.
And the answer is the family that you're called to have. And there's pros and cons. Large families, lots of energy, lots of fun, lots of conflict at times, you know, and
lots of workers for around the house.
Absolutely. You know, we share the chore chart, that kind of thing. You know, but there's problems, shared space. Every kid doesn't get the same level of attention from a parent. Sure. You know, we've got friends who've got like 6 or 7 kids. You know, the reality is you got 2 parents. They have to now divide their time, 6 ways, and their energies and focus. But there's a lot of fun with that too. You can have your own basketball team, that kind of thing. So, I actually said at one point when I was in high school, I wanted to have 10 kids so I could have, starters and subs on one team.
Wow. We're a good 5-on-5.
Yeah. And then I had 2 kids and I'm like, done. Tap out. Yeah, exactly. We're done. And partly because Carrie and I said if we have more than 2 kids, then we have to go from man to zone defense. So, and we so anyways.
See, but you lucked out because you got both a son and a daughter. I need a daughter.
Yeah, we'll
I'll say that.
We'll pray for that later. Hannah, if you're watching this, then anyways, we'll be praying for you too. Anyways.
Amen.
So what's better, a big or small family? Small families,
Yep.
There's pros and cons. Sometimes it's what is your family called to be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not every family is called to be a small family. So I think people have gifting and capacity to have large families or small families, depending on what God brings in your way. And so I think the same thing as the church. What's better? Both. All the above. What has God called you to do? I don't think there's anything inherently holy about having a small church if God has wired you for large church capacity.
Mm-hmm.
If God has given you giftedness to impact thousands of people, just because there's benefits in impacting a smaller group in a deeper way, that doesn't mean that's what God's called you to do. So part of it is just be the best family, whether it's a church family or a family. Be the best that God has called you to be.
And do yourself and Christianity a favor and don't ostracize a different type of family.
Absolutely. And to legitimize what God's called you to do.
Yes. You don't need that. You don't need to do that. Just be confident in your calling.
Right.
But the reason why I brought that up too is because you pointed out in Acts 2:42-47, we see both. There's the large gathering happening in the temple courts, which is, if you've been to the temple, to a temple court before,
right.
In the Middle Eastern context, it's massive.
It's huge.
It's gigantic. So they have a few thousand people.
At least, yeah.
Yep. Meeting in the temple courts.
Daily.
But then you also see people are meeting in homes. You can't get a few thousand people in a home.
Yeah.
So it's like...
You can't have level 4s and 5s conversation in a temple court with 1,000 people.
Right.
But you can do that in your home.
And here's what my experience has been with being in both a large church and I haven't really ever been a part of a really small church, but I've been a part of a lot of small groups. What I've seen is you get a really good sense of identity in a large church setting. You look when we get to look around in a worship center and you see hundreds, or sometimes, when we've been to church conferences and there's thousands of people, you look around and you're like, wow, heaven is awesome and diverse and beautiful and just an incredible mosaic of people. There's a sense of identity that is given in those settings. And then in smaller group settings or in a smaller church, there's a little bit more power. There's, all right, let's live this out. Let's be empowered by the Spirit. Not that you can't have that in a large setting.
Of course.
But just that intimacy, the iron sharpening iron, whatever.
It's harder to hide in a small church.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's still possible.
Right.
Yeah. Pros and cons. But anyways, that debate's gonna, and part of it is what has God called you to? But you're right that they're going, hey, I don't need to pull down what God's called you to do to make me feel better about what God, or to legitimize what God's called me to do. And that's the saddest thing is, if my kids did that, if one of my kids said, I've decided to become, God's called me to become a veterinarian, but the other kid doesn't, and this is totally hypothetical, neither one of my kids want to be veterinarians, but to go, and the other kid goes, no, I want to be a psychologist. I don't want one kid to say, well, psychologists never really do X, Y, and Z, and but dogs are the best thing. They're better than people. You don't have to say that. What are you called to do? And then be the best you can be, and cheer others on in that.
Yep. Cool. Now that we got that out of the way, we can break down the four
hubs of community
a little bit more.
Let me ask you a question. You've been leading the sanctuary community for 6 years now.
Yeah.
And you've been a part of...
Not leading it for 6 years. I started January 1st, 2017, overseeing it. But I've been a part of it since May 2015.
You've been a part of church in many different forms for years.
Yep.
But leading a community, what have you seen from people within those, coming into the front door of sanctuary? What's been both your experience in getting people to experience community on different levels? What have been the things that you've noticed in leading a community that you would want to acknowledge that are part of the fun and the pros and the cons of dealing with 4 levels of community within a larger community?
Well, I want to say this, and I'll say this again on Sunday night. Not just out of my own belief, but on retreats that we've had, especially on retreats, where we've had speakers from literally all over the country that, they're fairly well-known speakers that travel a lot, speak to a lot of different communities. Without a shadow of a doubt, every single time we've had somebody from outside of this community come in and speak to the young adult community known as Sanctuary. Shout out to Sanctuary in Fairfield, Connecticut. God is doing amazing things through these people. Every single time they've said, we've never seen a young adult community that is this vibrant and healthy.
Wow.
Every time.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. And so I think that sometimes our hands become callous to holy things and precious things. So I just want to acknowledge
that's awesome.
What's going on here is special and unique. And there are people from other places that are looking in and saying, how do we get that at our church? How do we get this type of healthy community in our place? And, again, we are a young adult community. And most of the time when, just as we get older and people age out of Sanctuary, they miss Sanctuary. They like the type of community that they have there. Or when they, move away to a different state or another country, whatever, they're trying to replicate what we have here in their setting. So I think that there's something beautiful to say that. And I just want to encourage our people
what a gift.
With that gift of hey, don't let your hands become callous to what God has provided us here. So I just want to start with that encouragement.
That's awesome.
I would say that one of the things that's really awesome about Sanctuary is that you can have those 4 different hubs and do it really well. So I think I've seen both extremes in my experience here. I'd say when I first entered into Sanctuary in May 2015, at that point, it's almost like the hubs were already established, the relationships are already there. So when new people were coming, they're like, well, I don't know where I can fit in. It seems like, everybody's having relationships already. They have their deeper circles.
Gotcha.
I'm just trying to enter into the public sphere, but I'm seeing deeper circles everywhere I go. And one of the things that my predecessor, Josh, would say to challenge people in that time is, especially people that have been coming to Sanctuary for a while, people that are volunteers, leaders in the community, is first 15 minutes before service and first 15 minutes directly after service are not for you and your friends. You're looking out into the public sphere and saying, who do we not know and how do we bring them in? And I think that when we've done that well...
As a connecting point from the public into the social?
Yes. At least, because that's exactly what happens. We want to move from just public space.
Yeah.
You're in a large worship center room. That's pretty, that's like a public feel. But what we encourage is, we almost do this every Sunday. We do this every Sunday night after service. Is either, hey, we're going to make a big family feel smaller. We're either going to have small groups immediately after service or stick around, take a risk, reach out to some people and go get food at a restaurant after this. Don't just take off. We want to give you the opportunity to move from public to social to eventually, as trust is built over time, maybe deeper, etc. So I think that Sanctuary, when it's at its best, does those things really well. And there's a healthy recognition that the public space, which is the Sunday night worship service, cannot hit the deeper levels that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But we're going to provide other avenues where it's we're doing relationships up close. So, sometimes I'm asked, why don't you speak on this? Why don't you speak on this? I'm like, I really don't want this conversation to be a monologue. I think it's better for us to converse about this because what I say, I don't know the experience that you've had. You might take what I'm saying in a really different way than what I'm actually trying to say. So I think if we were to have a conversation about this,
right,
we'd be able to understand each other better. Now, again, here's the other thing. When Sanctuaries had the realistic expectation that Hannah and I cannot be their intimate people, that intimate circle where you said that's 2 to 4 people, maybe your entire life.
Yeah.
And I think that one of sometimes the pressure we have, and I think that maybe this is because of what we talked about last week, where I mentioned with Andres, hey, I try, people are people will admire your strengths, but they'll connect with your weakness. And I've made it a point in every single one of my messages to give some type of like weakness or a vulnerable point away from me so that people can, like, I recognize I might be the heart connection for people to what God's word is saying. So I want to set myself up in that way. But then on the other hand, because people connect with that and because they're like, wow, I feel safe and that I can be real with this person, which is true, there's almost this expectation that I need to be the best friends in the world with Rob and Hannah. And like, you know, we have a community, I forget how many Treadwell said we have in our, you know, database now, in as far as like people that are actively at least once a month coming.
If we only had 50 people, you couldn't do that with.
Yeah, but the reality is we have hundreds and hundreds of people. And I just can't be that for everyone. But what I do pray is that within this community, like the good news is this isn't Rob and Hannah's place. Yeah, gotcha. This isn't Kevin and Carrie's place. This is our place. Yeah. The church is made up of a body of people, not just one person. Right. So it's never been built on me. It's never been built on you or Josh or whoever. Man, we make this community. Like one of the things we like to say is we make this happen. So, yeah, just being able to connect with people, find those deeper circles and those intimate circles. So, I don't know. I feel like I just rambled on for the last 6 minutes.
No, I think that's
any of this helpful.
Totally, and I think it's part of it is just figuring out. Okay, hey, these and all 4 hubs, in my experience, are actually really important. And I see people who actually love the deeper hub, and to the exclusion of the social or the public. And the reality is, you got into that deeper hub probably through the public. Yeah. Into the social and then to the deeper. And sometimes then we're going, hey, I've gotten what I wanted. I've got what I need. Mm-hmm. You know, the rest of you schmoes, you figure it out yourself. You know, and the answer is that doesn't work in the body of Christ, because we're not just a community. We're a spiritual community. We're a kingdom family. And so that we can go, hey, I do have some of my relational deeper needs met within a small group of people within this community and so on. So then how can I help other people find that too? How can I be the connecting point? How can I get them from the public, the front door? They walk into the place and they're trying to connect with God and with others. How can I help them into the social circle where we have fun? And that's one of the things I actually love about the social circle. It's a place where we get to have fun without the pressures of getting really deep, like to go to a basketball game with someone, to go out to eat with someone, to play cornholes in somebody's backyard.
Hey,
right?
Man.
Thank the Lord for cornholes.
Come on.
But, where you could just have fun, and it's okay to have people in a spiritual community that's still in the group of we get to have fun.
Yep.
And that's an opportunity in major ways. I just got a message. Someone just sent me a social media message, a DM, saying, hey, when I first came to Sanctuary years ago and I was leading it, forever ago, last century, that they said that they were coming just looking for friendships. And they said, I found people that I could have fun with. And in that, I felt like I belonged and discovered God.
That's so beautiful.
And that I was just looking for some
more
people, that, and this is a person that go, hey, I like to party. I went out and
sure.
All my friendships were based on, partying. And I was just looking for something deeper, but I didn't know it. But I had to start in the social circle. And that person said that they didn't use these phrases, but I came to Sanctuary for that social circle for probably 2 years before I found Jesus.
Wow.
But they could sense something different about us as a community,
right,
than the other social circles they found themselves in, because we still had fun, but in a way that gave life, in a way that was honoring of people, in who they are. And so I that's one of those opportunities that I think sometimes we miss because we're like, oh, it's all about the deeper. We want to love God, love others.
Right.
And we love that stuff. You have to have that in your life, but you also need to have fun. You need to have a broader group of people and some friends. You just, hey, we go fishing. That's not me. But anyways.
I don't know many people in Connecticut that do that. Maybe like Zach and Bruce.
Maybe. That's right.
That's about it.
So, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But to get to that social circle, you've got to usually go through the front door of the public.
Well, and what I want to say also, just to kind of like wrap up this conversation a bit, is that you mentioned there are people that want the deeper and then they're like, I'm good.
Yeah.
But again, they access that through the public and social. I have seen, in my experience here as well, our community is at its best when people that are more comfortable with staying public in the public and social circles are then stretched into deeper and maybe intimate ones. And when people who are more comfortable with deeper and intimate circles are stretched into public and social ones.
Good.
Here's what I mean by that. The amount of times that I've had volunteers before service, when we've said, hey, 15 minutes before service, 15 minutes after service, connect with new people you don't know. You know what I hear from half the people? I'm an introvert. I don't do well in that.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, that is a lame butt excuse.
Yeah, for sure.
To censored word there.
Yeah.
Didn't want Zach using the bleep button.
Yeah, that's right.
But here's the deal. I have told them, because I'm a naturally extroverted person, I can thrive really well in the public and social circles.
Right.
But I've told the introverts who are more used to like, hey, I'll thrive in that deeper and intimate setting. I've said, you will connect with other introverts way better than I will.
Totally. We blow them away. They're like,
I intimidate
too much,
them.
too soon.
They're like, dude, you're too high energy for me.
Yeah.
Get away from me. Right?
Yep.
But I'm like, you will know how to connect with people that I won't be able to connect with super well. So actually go and, find the person who's not in the big circle, not in the big hub, who's by themselves texting on their phone. Like that's dead giveaway sign of you need to go have a conversation with someone.
They're hiding in their phone.
On the other hand, when people who have stayed in the public and social circle, and again, we want to be patient. I like how you just mentioned this person who reached out to you. It was after a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we're a patient community too.
And to build all these levels, it takes time.
It takes time. It takes trust. It takes risk.
That's right.
So we're going to be patient. But at some point, if you're that person who, like me, for most of my life, was comfortable in just staying in the public and social setting and not getting into deeper stuff, at some point you got to just take that leap.
Yeah.
So stretching yourself in that way as well. And again, when I've seen Sanctuary at its best, it's when we're being stretched out of those zones into other areas and recognizing that all four are important. All four are so necessary to help keep this a vibrant, healthy, Christ-centered community that is not just looking into what God is doing in here, but looking out to what God wants to do to our neighborhoods, to our coworkers, to our friends, to people that are coming in the doors for the first time. And again, we're not a perfect church. We have not always done this well.
Yeah.
Like, we're not pretending to be a perfect church because we don't have to.
That's
like, we serve a perfect Savior, but we're imperfect people trying to become a little bit more like Him. Like, so we'll mess up in these areas, and there's grace for that.
Absolutely.
But just like as an observation, I think if you're listening to this podcast, I think that a good activation point and action step from here is just be self-aware of where do I thrive best and know that.
Yep.
And what are going to be some stretching points that are going to grow me as a person and maybe even help other people grow because of me being willing to stretch myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And how can you love God by loving others?
Yeah.
That aren't always in your friendship pool. Well, That's awesome.
So good.
That's good. And I think that thing of just going, be committed. Be committed to community because that's the only way it works.
Careful because you're almost going to give away some message. Preview for this Sunday night's message.
Nice segue.
Preview for this Sunday night's message.
I'm looking forward to it.
Going to be talking about kind of my experience here as well. I'll have a key passage I'm really looking forward to and talk about things that I've seen build this community and destroy it in my 6 years here.
Wow.
So what are things that we're going to be all for as God's people, and what are things that we're going to say, nope, this is not us.
Wow.
And things that might even be socially acceptable and maybe culturally encouraged in our day and age that we need to say, we're not going to do that because we're desiring to get closer.
That's good.
Anyway, love you all. Kevin, bless the people.
Yeah. I just bless everybody who's watching or listening to experiencing the deep, deep friendship with God and deep community that you were created for. I bless you to have the commitment, the courage, the boldness, the tenacity, the perseverance to continue to go after God's dream for you and for the community he's creating. I bless you to have an amazing week encountering God with his love and grace. Amen. Bless you guys.